Austin start with our first recipe tonight. It's the cherry chard wild rice. So Austin has been researching about chard, so he's got all the answers to that. So Austin can tell us about that first recipe.
All right. Glad you guys could all make it out tonight. How many of you all have had chard before? Anyone? A couple of y'all. Yeah. So chard kind of tastes what I think a mixture between spinach and the root really tastes more like a beet to me. So it's kind of earthy or bitter. And what this recipe does a great job of is kind of, you have to steam the chard so it kind of dulls down that bitter taste a little bit, and then has a good mixture of other flavors as well in that. So one thing I wanted to make note of on this recipe when I was making it is that you really want to use a good rice cooker or like a trusty pot with a good lid on it that you're familiar with. I cooked it at my parents' house where I don't ever really cook rice, and it took me, the directions for the wild rice took as 45 minutes and ended up taking me about an hour. So just so you know, rice is finicky like that. So 1 cup of Swiss chard has a good source of vitamin A, C, and vitamin K. We've talked about vitamin A a lot recently with the squash. Does anyone know what vitamin A is good for in our body? Raise your hand. Yep, point to your eyes. It's good for your eyesight. Also with skin health and immune system function. So you guys are learning, that's great. Chard also has, although you may not think of it, also has sodium in it and some calcium. So those are 2 things we don't really think of a vegetable to have in it often. Also has potassium and magnesium. These are very important electrolytes that can help regulate our blood pressure if you have troubles with that at all. It also has dietary nitrites, which is kind of a unusual term we throw around. Nitrites are often found in beets as well, and I believe it's in this red color here. And that actually helps improve your blood flow. Really opens up your blood vessels, so get that circulation going in those winter months so you stay warmer. Next ingredient I want to talk about is wild rice. So did you guys know there's over 40,000 varieties of rice in the world? That is a lot. Yeah, quite a bit. There's 4 different varieties of wild rice. One is in Asia, and then the other 3 are found in North America, actually, which I didn't think that rice would be grown here, but they're actually all grown right next to the Great Lakes. So wild rice is actually higher in protein and fiber compared to other rices. So that's really good if you're worried about, this recipe has a good source of protein in it for you. And that is 7 grams of protein and 3 grams of dietary fiber in 1 cup of cooked rice, wild rice. It also has a good source of B vitamins, which are really important in our metabolism, so breaking down energy, and so we can use those nutrients to feel energized. So the wild rice, I think, has like a nutty flavor. So you have that nutty flavor with the walnuts and the rice, and a little bit bitter, and the cherries bring it kind of sour and tart. Also with the vinaigrette of sour and tart. So it has like a good mixture of different flavors, I think, and a lot of different textures in this recipe. The other ingredient I want to talk about is the walnut. So walnut, botanically speaking, is not a nut. It's called a drupe. But culinary speaking, it is a nut. So, fun fact. It's a great source of omega-3 and omega-6 fat, which those will help reduce your inflammation and kind of improve your ratio of the LDL and HDL cholesterol. So LDL is that lethal cholesterol that we want or don't want, and HDL is a good cholesterol that we do want. So it helps better that ratio for us. if we eat just 1 ounce of walnuts a day, it'll help with our cardiovascular health in that way too. So, did you guys like it at all? Maybe? Good? Yep, good?
What causes the sweetness to it though?
The cherries.
The cherries, yeah.
Okay. Even though they're a sour cherry?
Yep. They're still naturally sweet,
Yep.
so they have those sugar in it.
And where do you find, is dried sour cherries, is that something common?
I found them at Walmart,
Okay.
so
I've
I
never
found it
looked at
there.
dried sour.
Whenever I was eating it, I felt like the nuttiness and like the sweetness almost tasted like a brown sugar cinnamony flavor. I don't know if that's just me, but maybe if someone else tastes that, maybe like with the bitterness of the chard and then the nuttiness of the rice and walnuts and then the sweetness of the cherry. It was interesting.
Now, as far as cleaning the chard, it talks about using that thick stem, cutting it out and then chopping it up. It's almost like celery. Whenever you get in there and start chopping on it, it kind of reminds you of celery. But basically, you're going to want to wash the greens really well. I try to get them into even proportions as far as their size. You're not going to be able to get it perfectly symmetrical, obviously, but you can get a good amount in there. And you're just gonna go around on the back side. It's easier to cut from the back side than it is the front side, because as you can see how it almost like pooches up there around the veins. Sometimes that will be overlapping and you won't be able to see the stem down the center. But if you lay it out on its back, you'll be able to cut right down until it gets to about the same thickness as the veins there. Those are going to be soft enough that they're going to cook up just like the rest of the chard will without any problems. Go ahead and soften it up. So, and you're just trying to, again, just keeping it in bite-sized portions. You don't want anything too big. You don't want to cut it too small to where it's just pulverized in there. It's not going to really do you any good either. You discard the stems. They do get beat up quite a bit, I've noticed. Some of them were really small leaves, and they had gotten really beat up just in packaging and transport. And so you can discard those if you have any issues eating something that doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. I know we've done classes in the past with actually utilizing those things that don't look as nice on what we call our scraps from cutting our vegetables and things like that. And then you're just going to want to chop those stems nice and thin. I will tell you that using the rainbow chard, it really was a really, really pretty setup. I kept the leaves separate from the stems, had a good variety of all the different colors. There's different shades of red and pink and orange and yellow and green. Even found a few that were almost white in color, like this one here, where it's more white than it is green. Really turned out to be a really, really pretty dish. I was talking to Austin before we got started, and I said, I think what would probably make this a lot nicer is to have everything ready right before you serve. So if you're going to make this dish at home, make it in such a way that you're adding them together, the chard and the rice, right before you get ready to serve it. Because I think what happens is the longer it sets from the time you finish it to the time you serve it, that chard's going to continue to cook down, and then it's just going to be pulverized. So a little bit difficult of a recipe to do in our setting, but I still think the flavors came through, and they stayed right where we wanted them to. But as far as pleasing to the eye, I think you'll really get a really nice pop with the colors, as long as everything kind of stays together. And you'll find that to be a lot easier to handle if you put them all together right at the very end, right before you serve them.
So I have the nutty kale salad, and I really like this salad because kale has been really popular lately. It's kind of a hot topic of food right now. But the salad is really easy to make. It's just a couple ingredients, and it's really nutrient dense. So the salad only contains 281 calories, but it contains a lot of good vitamins and minerals that are great for our health. So starting with the kale, kind of like how Austin mentioned earlier, with the chard, it's a good source of vitamin A, which is great for our eye health and our skin. Vitamin C, which is good for hair, skin, and nails, and then of course boosting our immune system. And kale actually has just as much vitamin C. Well, 1 cup of kale has just as much vitamin C as an orange, which I did not know before kind of doing a little bit more research. So I thought that was really interesting. And then also, it's a good source of vitamin K, which is good for blood clotting, and then fiber as well. So we all know that fiber also helps regulate our digestion, but it can also help improve our HDL to LDL cholesterol levels. So when preparing the kale, he's going to demonstrate how to cut it, I believe. But whenever you're making the salad, you also want to massage the kale. So we're going to mix all of the dressing in together, and it's just a tossed salad. But you want to massage the kale to help break down the toughness of it. So it'll make it a little bit more softer, easier to eat, and also kind of give a more mild, desirable flavor when doing that. Are you doing something similar, just like the chard?
Yep, you just basically go ahead and remove most of the stem out of it. Some different types of kale have a little bit harder stems than others, so just if you don't mind cutting it off and using a little bit more of it, then go for it. It really is up to you. Then you're just going to roll that up. It's easier to hold onto it and easier to slice it really thin if you roll it up as best as you can. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do it very well, so you're just going to want to try to chop it as best you can. So, like I said, you can also just cut it off right about there, and then do the same thing. Just roll that up really nice. Leave the whole end down so that it stays right where you want it. And then we're just going to slice it nice and thin. Into the bowl.
So another thing I didn't know is that kale is considered a cruciferous vegetable. So it's the same classification as broccoli, cabbage. I believe chard falls in that same category as well. So it grows best in cooler climates. The next thing I want to talk about would be almonds. So Austin also mentioned how his nuts were considered drupes, but we always classify them as nuts. And almonds are the same way. We would consider them drupes as well. But almonds have great health benefits. They're a great source of monounsaturated fats, those healthier fats we would call. And they're also a good source of vitamin E, and contain a little bit of protein as well. So they help kind of balance out the meal. Moving on to the buttermilk. How many of you guys like buttermilk? Yeah, a couple of you guys? I'm personally not a big fan of it because I haven't really experimented with it a whole lot. Usually you see it in baked goods. I've never made a dressing with buttermilk, so this was pretty interesting for me. Yeah, ranch is a good buttermilk one. But buttermilk has quite a few health benefits as well. It has the same nutrients as regular milk, so it has the same amount of carbs and protein, but it also is considered a probiotic. So buttermilk is fermented, bacteria is added to it to help the fermentation process, and that bacteria is actually good for our GI system. It helps promote healthy bacteria in our gut, which I thought was really neat. And then lastly, the last thing I want to talk about would be the olive oil. So we did use extra virgin olive oil. How many of you guys know the difference between olive oil and then extra virgin olive oil? So with extra virgin olive oil, it's the purest form of olive oil. It's cold pressed, so it's unrefined oils. And then the regular olive oil, it's a little bit more refined, not quite as pure as extra virgin olive oil.
So the next recipe that we're going to try is the pear and pomegranate salad with orange poppy seed vinaigrette. And so if that doesn't get your mouth watering, I hope once you see it, it really will. So this recipe is just a beautiful salad. Before I jump into the nutrition of the salad, I really wanted to share a little bit about the anatomy of the salad. And so when you are trying to make a beautiful salad like this pomegranate salad, you really want to start out with a lovely deep green like this spinach. And so spinach is really easy to get this time of year. It's one of those vegetables that you can easily grow in a covered structure. They like to grow in cooler temperatures like this. That's why oftentimes in the wintertime and in the spring you can get really good prices on things like spinach. The spinach has got a lot of great nutrients in it. It's iron rich, it's got a lot of vitamin K, two things that are really important for our blood health. So start out your salad, your base of your salad, with a good, deep, rich vegetable like this spinach. Next, you're going to want to add a fruit. And so we've got two fruits in this salad. We have both pear and we have a pomegranate. These are two fruits that, again, are really widely available this time of year. You can get pears, you can get pomegranates. Their seasons are towards the fall and into the winter, and so you should find good prices with them. Next, you want to add something like a little vegetable, which we don't have in this dish at this time, but you can add a vegetable or a dressing. And in our dressing, we've got a lot of great flavors. And so just wanted to share the anatomy of a salad, and that's how we built this one here. All right, as far as the nutrition goes, I'm going to focus primarily on this beautiful pomegranate. So I'm going to scooch over here a second. And can y'all see that? So this is a pomegranate. Has anyone ever purchased a pomegranate or tried one before? Yeah? All right. Jared's going to show us how to navigate cutting it and getting at the fruited seeds on the inside. But pomegranates come in a variety of sizes, and so oftentimes here in the Midwest we see these larger ones, more apple or grapefruit size, but they can actually grow quite small. You can get them in a lemon size, and in each pomegranate they have a bunch of seeds. And so you can see those seeds in your salad. And the little red berries there. And each of those seeds are kind of sweet or tart, depending on the pomegranate. I found that the pomegranate we had here today, it's kind of sweet. What do you think as you taste it? Yeah. So these pomegranate seeds are full of wonderful antioxidants. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about those antioxidants. In these pomegranate seeds, we find something called punicalagins and punicic acid. And so two polyphenols that are believed to have some powerful medicinal properties. And so one of the things that's wonderful about eating fruits and vegetables is that they can carry oftentimes an antioxidant punch. And we certainly find that in this pomegranate. It's what gives it a bright color. If you've ever cut a pomegranate, it's what causes that staining. It's those polyphenols. And they also have great work inside our bodies. The polyphenols that we find that, I'm not going to try to say those words again, but those two different acids, they are responsible for the health benefits. They are believed to help with oxidation in our bodies, and so things that cause cellular or cells to suffer degradation, so things that will help us fight cancer or chronic disease like heart disease and diabetes. These pomegranates have a great nutrient profile. They've got a lot of fiber, so 7 grams in 1 cup of the arils, which are those little seeded fruits, 3 grams of protein, and a lot of vitamin C and vitamin K, about 30% that you need for the day. So a lot of nutrition in these beautiful little seeds. What do y'all think of the dressing? All right, as I was making this dressing, I found that you could certainly make it by mixing it inside the mason jar, and so you just add your ingredients and shake. It would be a great activity to do if you had small children in the home, or if you wanted to get a little bit of workout before your meal, or I thought it was easier to incorporate the ingredients with a whisk, so either way will work. But in that vinaigrette, you've got something kind of tangy. You've got the orange juice, Dijon mustard, and apple cider vinegar. It gives it a little bit of acid. And then you pair that acid, that tanginess, with a little sweetness, so with a little bit of added honey. And I think it pairs really, really well with this salad. What do you think? One unique thing about that orange juice, it's going to help keep the pears from browning. So you might notice that those pears, they haven't browned, have they? No. The orange juice that you find fine, and that vinaigrette helps keep those pears a bright white. And so it's an antioxidant, helps keep those cells happy inside that pear.
Less blemish is better. You'll find that little indentions like this here, or this one right here. I don't know if you can see that. Just a little scrape. Stuff like that probably isn't a big deal. Something like this right here, I bet when we go to cut this open, this bottom part right here will have some brown seeds. It really is difficult because that rind is so thick that it's really easy even to get bugs or something down inside of here that get in and tunnel in during the early process of the growing of the fruit. So heftier the better. Usually if it's heftier, that means that there's more seeds, or it has a good seed population in there, and they're nice and full. Sometimes I've bought them in the past where they weren't really quite in season, and all of the pulp around the seed was kind of pale and quite a bit smaller than normal. So the heft of it is going to make a big difference as well. So less damage, the better.
When are they in season typically?
Now.
Now?
Yeah.
And say here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's September through February. And then if you were to get it shipped in from the Southern Hemisphere, so places like South America, for example, where they are grown, it would be more late spring.
Does anybody know how to clean them?
I haven't done it that way, but yes, I've watched.
They could be a pain, right?
I feel it.
So we're going to beat them up. That's what we're going to do today.
Really?
Yes.
Even though they're in season, how do you tell they're ripe?
The coloration is going to help a lot. The size, the coloration, you want them to be nice and firm. But at the same time, you want the, well, I cut it off on this end because it got damaged in shipping. You can smell around that area of it, more of where like the flowering part of the plant would be. It's going to smell like pomegranate, nice and ripe smelling. That can make a difference. Now, I tell you these things because at times that really doesn't always work. And a lot of that has to deal with how our produce is treated from being shipped from place to place. You know, like bananas are wrapped when they're really green to keep that process slowed down, then they get shipped into the United States, and it makes it a little bit difficult to determine whether it really is good and ripe or if it is just going to seem like it's good and ripe. So pomegranates, though, they will get heftier the more ripe they are. So really that heft is going to be a big indicator of how ripe they are. And the coloration, you want nice and dark red like that. Cleaning them, getting all the seeds extracted. I found this one to be by far the easiest and the quickest. So what you're going to do is, whatever your non-dominant hand is, if you're left-handed like me, cut with your left, hold with your right. And you're just going to try to hold the stem and the stern, and you're just going to score all the way around it really lightly. You don't want to go real deep. You're just trying to cut down through the pomegranate. All right. Then it's going to pop right open, okay? Then you're just going to work yourself around. You start popping loose all those little segments, right?
I'd
we're
say
gonna
it's a
hold it.
labor of love.
We're going to hold it over there.
Wow. Yeah.
I did, yeah. So, now we've got a section here on this outside edge that's got some bad pomegranate seeds. So then on this side, we're going to do the same thing.
And you know that, how do you know that?
What's that?
How do you know that?
Well, they are significant. Let me just show this to you.
They're just browned.
They're just
Oh,
really
okay.
brown.
Okay.
Usually if there's a lot of browning on the outside edges, but it's not throughout, it's either one of two things. It's been damaged from getting bumped around, or more than likely from the look of this one, it got too cold. Some process and shipping, it got too cold, and it didn't partially freeze, but it partially froze the fruit, which will ruin the meat there. So you do the same thing to the other side. You just work it around, try to break loose as much of that as you can, then you go back to beating it up. If you get one edge, it seems like the floured part of the pomegranate, that half of it is going to be a little bit more difficult to get the seeds out. But if you start right on that outside edge like I did there, it'll work.
Way cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
And then you end up with, nice and clean, and all your seeds are ready to go.
That would work even if you're 1 pound at a time, like a couple of times.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
have
You
to
can
do
also,
Wild, I like
a lot of times whenever you go to rinse, once you do this, you can add some water in there to rinse them off. And that will allow some of the little bits and particles of the rind. A lot of that stuff will float to the top and you can scoop it off, scrape it off. And then that way you've got nothing but your seeds left ready to eat.
Wow.
I want to add a little bit to what Jared shared. So pomegranate season here in the northern hemisphere, like I shared, is in the wintertime, September to February. So that's when I would expect you to find the best prices in our store. But be mindful, we're here in the Midwest. These fruits are grown in more tropical areas, and so here in the United States, we only find pomegranates, grown in great quantity in Arizona and in California. You might find, a botanical garden or someone who's really interested in growing plants. They might be able to successfully grow one in a greenhouse, but the kind that you buy at the store, they're probably going to come from one of those two states, or it's flown in from somewhere. So, it may not come perfect to your home, but isn't it amazing that we can get it here in the Midwest? A little bit about the history of it. It originates from Iran and northern India, and today you find a lot of pomegranates in that Mediterranean basin. You also find them in Asia, and those cultures have just a lot of appreciation for the fruit. They hold significance for fertility, for being able to even own a tree that had them, and so you'd often find them decorated around temples or on fine clothing or in jewelry. And so the pomegranate has some rich history and as far as its significance to culture in those areas. You even find mentions of the pomegranate in the Bible, which is kind of interesting. Jared talked a little bit about the flowers. It's a bright red flower, the pomegranate. It's about 1.5 inches. And the end of the fruit, actually, it looks like a little bit of a flower. And that was the part that Jared said he had cut because it had damage. But you'll find that it has looks like a little bitty crown on that fruit.
So our last recipe is really kind of, what do you think of at Thanksgiving? Turkey and dressing. So this is really a substitute for a dressing. And Jared and I had this discussion about stuffing or dressing.
Yes.
So, and what was Jared gave me the answer.
Yes, the difference between stuffing and dressing, stuffing goes in a bird. Dressing doesn't.
So I did find that the concept of stuffing supposedly appeared in the very first cookbook that was in like the 2nd century BC. They talked about stuffing. And so it's kind of the stuffing has been around a long time. It does get its name from the act of stuffing something and is still used today. But I think in England in like the 1300s or so, or the 16th century even, the stuffing word was considered a farce in England. So they thought that in England that word stuffing was a little crude and too harsh for the elite society. So that's when they kind of started referring to they kind of derived it from the act of stuffing a bird to dressing. So that's where it kind of made its changeover, because stuffing was a crude terminology. So, you know, if you came to America before 1880, you call it stuffing, and if you came to America after 1880, you call it dressing. So, so actually then I found that we got stovetop stuffing from guess who? Kraft. When they introduced in like 1970s, early 1970s, they claimed it to be an instant stuffing. So it really wasn't stuffed at all, right? You did it on the stovetop, or maybe you put it in the oven, but they coined it as to be a stovetop stuffing. So anyway, most Southerners call it dressing, and Northerners call it stuffing. And Jared is exactly right. The stuffing means it goes in a bird. So we tried to kind of look at something that might be a little different, a little healthier maybe. I mean, you may still want to do your traditional dressing at home or stuff it into your bird, whichever one you want to do. But this was a wild rice. We've already used wild rice in one of our earlier recipes, right? So you got it already hanging around your house. So this is just taking wild rice, and you can find wild rice in the grocery store. I believe we found it at Walmart. Austin, he found it at Walmart. Is that where? Yeah, so a couple of different brands that are wild rice. You can also, do something like this if you don't find the dry wild rice, but leave out the seasoning packet that goes with this particular rice. And the reason being, I'll share with you in just a few minutes. So, you do cook your rice. My rice took about 15-20 minutes to cook. This kind of one Austin used did take longer, so it might take up to the 45 minutes that it suggests on the recipe. It might take about 15 or 20, like I got. That worked much better for me. So you just cook the wild rice, and then you take some of the same things we typically use in our Thanksgiving dressing, onion and celery. This has mushrooms, which I really like. I don't know about you guys. Mushrooms are a good thing to add to things. So the onion, celery, mushrooms, and you just saute those in that olive oil. Of course, you know all the good reasons to use that olive oil. And then you stir in your rice, and then you do have dried cranberries. And then you can also add pecans if you choose to. The pecans are chopped, and I found that I really like that nutty, that crunch of those chopped pecans in this one whenever I tried it. And I really like the cranberries. Of course, I did use sweetened cranberries. I'm not sure I think you left out the word sweetened in this, but they're most of all what we can find is, of course, sweetened cranberries. So you do some traditional, adding some sage. I did the dried. It would be great. I think it would help it even more if we use the fresh sage.
We use fresh.
Okay, this one did have fresh in it. I'll have to taste it then, because mine just used the dried. You can actually reduce the sodium in this, which is what we pick up a lot of when we do a mix like this. The sodium content in a cup of this wild rice has about 650 milligrams. And we've got about half that in this particular recipe, and you could reduce that even further if you didn't put the salt in the rice whenever you cook it. When I did it, I didn't put the salt in the rice. I did use a little bit of salt later on when I mixed it together, but not the full teaspoon that it calls for in the recipe. So your wild rice may be prepared a little bit differently than actually what this recipe says, depending on what kind you purchase. And then you just combine those things together. I think the cranberries really add something nice to it, and I like the nuts to it as well. So the difference again is in that sodium content, that this would be a little bit healthier version of something to have. And maybe there's that one person that's coming to your Thanksgiving dinner that doesn't like good old traditional dressing. I don't know. Most people do. But if you wanted to try, a second dish in addition to traditional dressing, or if you do stuffing. If you do stuffing and you stuff it in a bird, you need to really remember that you need to make sure that it does get heated enough. The USDA does recommend that if you stuff it in a bird, you really need to make sure that, your turkey may just get to 165, but you need to make sure that the bacteria in the stuffing also is not increase